I mean, John Candy himself couldn't even walk around London without being spotted like this. How do they not see the new king?
Well, maybe they confuse him with John Goodman.
Fuck, what did I say?
John Candy.
God damn it. I'm getting ready for Game of Thrones.
There you go.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked out.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we ask, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, then this is the podcast for you. I'm your host, Gene Lyons, and alongside of me are my two co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And the King B.
Dick of what?
And together we're going to take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week, the audience selects from 6 movie choices, and we break out the race car VHS tape rewinder and watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. At the end of the podcast, King B, Big D, and I will provide the audience with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective bums. So find a comfortable spot on the sofa and accompany us for a journey through our vast VHS movie collections. You can download Shat the Movies via iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Pandora, TuneIn, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are found. Guys, we have another commission in this month of Commission Palooza. Just so many wonderful listeners picking their favorite movies, whether good or bad, and sending them our way. Big D, what do we got?
Yeah, this week we got a special one. It comes from a listener, Adam F. And he said, I decided to commission King Ralph. I'm not sure why, but as an 11-year-old farm kid in southern Indiana, I was drawn to this movie. The premise of an American being king of England amazed me. I was 11 when I first saw it, the age when my parents started letting me watch some adultish films. This, along with Mr. Baseball, were 2 I could watch without having to ask, and I felt like an adult watching this movie that had scenes from a strip club, plots of treason, a baritone princess from Finland, and even then I knew her voice did not match her looks. Now as an adult, I've discovered on my mom's side that I am a descendant of a lesser noble family who lost their estate in the 1600s, and have wondered how many people would it have taken in a freak accident for me to ascend to the throne while slim, there is a chance. And that was Adam F. from Indiana, who grew up loving King Ralph.
Adam, I'm so glad you took the time to write in this explanation because I was convinced that you did this purely for sadistic purposes. There's actually an article on Vice that was written by a Briton about King Ralph, saying it is one of the most cruel actions ever taken in the world of cinema. So I'm glad that you highlighted some things that you liked about it. And I think you and I are on the same page as far as the highlights of this movie. I don't know if our wipe scores would be quite the same.
I was convinced that this was going to be one of our London listeners because we have surprisingly a large audience in England. And I thought, like with The Natural we released, a lot of them wrote in and said, hey, I haven't watched the baseball movie. I don't even know how it works, but I listened to the podcast, watched the movie. I thought this was their way of getting back to us.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically Strike Back at the Colonies. But I think what's amazing about it is this is a movie that was made from an American perspective, kind of championing an American. But really, when you look back at it, this was still the 90s and a time when we weren't so full of ourselves that we didn't laugh at ourselves. Like, it is clearly the joke is on John Goodman and not the British.
I don't know. I think the joke's on everybody involved, whether it's professionally or plot-wise. There's nobody who escapes this movie unscathed.
Personally, I feel this movie was probably written by a bus driver or someone of a similar working class ilk who really has no knowledge of London or the UK at all. They just know what they really, really like and wanted to put it in a movie.
So for those who haven't seen King Ralph, basically the plot's pretty simple. The royal family is accidentally killed while taking a photo, and the heir to the throne proves to be a loutish American named Ralph Jones, played by John Goodman. Overnight, Ralph goes from a sleazy Las Vegas lounge singer to the King of England, and it's Royal Secretary Cedric Willingham's job to civilize him. Cedric is played by the amazing Peter O'Toole. It's not easy weaning Ralph off fast food, and even harder keeping away from a kindly stripper played by Camille Coduri. Meanwhile, the next would-be heir, played by John Hurt, plots Ralph's demise. So guys, I remember seeing this movie when I was like 11 years old. We didn't have a lot of money when I was young, and so every summer we would go out to California to visit my mom's best friend in Orange County. And she has two sons who actually grew up to be the founders of Shat Studios. But we spent summers together, and they would always show me like the latest cool stuff in LA. So they're like Terminator 2 and like getting me into Guns N' Roses and the Black Crows. They were the first people I knew with like cell phones that could go in their pockets. And one summer, after all this cool shit, they showed me King Ralph. And even then, as an 11-year-old, I was like, ugh, this is not on par with everything else.
Maybe this was a test to see if you agreed with them that this was cool. Then they knew you weren't cool. If you called them out and said, no, this is, needless to say, I have never seen this movie before. I was in high school at the time. I don't know why anybody would see this, or any 11 or 12-year-old kid would be like, yeah, I'm going to go fucking see King Ralph. I have no idea. So I've never seen it before. And sadly, after today, I can never say those words again.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, way down in South Chandler, Arizona, where the Sun Lakes retirement community meets the Indian reservation. There was a small video store next to the grocery store. And part of my, weekly chores, I had to drive down and do the grocery shopping. And I always got to pick out the movie from the video store. One of my dad's requests was, go get that King Ralph with the fat guy in it. So I think it was to me, King Ralph is just one of those like classic tiny video store VHS fodder movies. They just cranked them all out. They're very formulaic. I wouldn't be surprised if the same people made these as a bunch of other trash films. Straight for the VHS market.
I just wonder when this movie came out if young Kevin James was somewhere going like, yeah, I could do that. And then, decades later, Paul Blart Mall Cop.
Fuck it. This would make anyone think they could write a Hollywood script. This is to blame for all the people going out there and doing a treatment and walking around Hollywood and failing. It's because you figure if this gets made, anything is possible.
I would argue that this is the result of someone seeing a movie that made them think anyone could do this and making a movie.
All right, Big D, let's get to the trailer.
The rain appears to have stopped, Your Majesty. We should be able to continue with the portrait.
Right, we're ready now, everybody. Now, after 3. 1, 2, 3...
Oh, dear.
Now, a new king must be found.
Excuse me, Sir Cedric.
Yes?
I do believe we found an heir.
John Goodman is King Ralph.
That's the Duke of Warren, your unfortunate grandfather. You have his chin.
He's got a lot to learn.
Where do we start? Everywhere.
A royal personage must refrain from chewing gum, using profanity, picking his nose, and staring down the bust lines of visiting female dignitaries.
What the hell? That's everything.
It's an unmitigated catastrophe. This song and dance man from the colonies.
He's smashing.
Date night.
He's dashing.
Sir Cedric, the king's gone. He just walked out.
Think, man. You've just been made King of England. Where's the first place you would go?
2 double whoppers with fries and 2 giant Cokes.
You're the new king.
He's a cut above.
All right. 1 or 2.
He's a king in love.
You're not the kind of girl I'm used to. You can spell, you wear clothes to work.
As king, you are expected to marry a woman of noble birth, particularly given your less than perfect breeding.
Do you ever do any fencing? Just a little when I was a kid. A couple watches here and there.
I say it is time to reclaim our throne.
Universal Pictures presents John Goodman. Peter O'Toole.
I mean, it could have been worse.
Yes, he could have exposed himself, I suppose.
King Ralph.
Doubts remain as to whether the American-born king is cut from the proper cloth.
Oh,
I'm sorry. Oh, you all right? I got him good. I'm sorry.
When the entire British royal family is killed in a freak accident outside Buckingham Palace, Sir Cedric Willingham leads a search for any surviving heirs to whom to pass the crown. After days of researching, his team finally locates a living heir in the form of an American named Ralph Jones. Shortly after being fired from his job as a lounge singer in Las Vegas, Ralph is informed by Cedric's assistant, Private Secretary Duncan Phipps, that his grandmother, Constance, had an affair with the first Duke of Warren while working as a hotel waitress when the Duke was visiting the United States, resulting in Ralph having royal blood. Phipps provides further proof by showing Ralph a duplicate of the ring his grandmother used to wear that the Duke had given her.
Yeah, if you're looking for a cinematic masterclass in how to showcase the horrible, gruesome, and immediate deaths of 30 or 40 people all at once without any trappings of consequence or terror or, stomach churning at just witnessing 30 or 40 corpses, this is it.
I did a little bit of research, so I'm going to take the mantle for Kerry Gross here, that when someone is electrocuted with that much juice, there's cases where the rib cages are broken, where people's muscles will spasm and rip. They'll pop like a hot dog in a microwave. They just skip all that, and it ends with the comedic family shot. But the problem I kept asking is, where's the kids? Where's the children? The royal family do one thing well. They procreate. There's always like little kids running around. What happened to little kids? Where were they? Were they worried this would set the wrong tone?
I think in trying to mask the violence of electrocution, which, by the way, a lot of those people had like shoes on, so I don't think all of them would be dead. You'd have some people probably horribly hurt, but they all died. I mean, it's very, very efficient. But in trying to mask the gruesome reality of electrocution, the movie actually left some people unaware of the fact that the family was dead. I think it was the one job you had in the opening scene was to tell us they were all dead, and they fucked that up from the beginning.
Well, they do a bunch of the newspaper covers flashing by quickly, but the entire country doesn't mourn once. They seem to get over it pretty quick. How about we see some people upset? Cedric and all the other employees, they seem pretty cool with it.
So I hate to start fact-checking this early, but we've already started with the electrocution, so that ball is rolling. I was like, okay, is it actually possible for an American to become the King of England? And so with recent events, actually, with Prince Harry marrying Meghan Markle, who is an American, it actually would be possible for any offspring they might have to become the Queen or King of England. If William's entire line were wiped out, the throne could go to an American. So distinct possibility, probably not going to happen. I would avoid any sort of large-scale photo shoots, though, Prince William. So shifting from that horrible opening scene, we do see Phipps going over to Vegas to meet with Ralph. And Phipps, by the way, is played by Uncle Beefy Weefs from the Harry Potter series. His uncle, Dursley. I thought it was a fantastic casting. There were a lot of people in this movie who are like perfectly born for the roles they played. The roles just themselves weren't so good. And I think the best example of that is John Goodman. And it's an understatement to say this movie is so beneath his talents.
No.
Remember, John Goodman is the guy that gave us Walter in The Big Lebowski, Big Dan Teague in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, Charlie Meadows in Barton Fink, and Creighton Burnett in the King Bee's favorite show ever, Treme. Now you've got him as some unbelievable buffoon doing like monkey gags. Shame on you, King Ralph. Shame.
You say that this is beneath him. I totally disagree. If you go back and look at John Goodman, he is the junk food connoisseur of movie roles. He takes anything. There were times in the 80s that he was putting out 4, 5, 6 movies a year. You can't put out anything quality from that time frame. He just did everything, and hopefully, one of them stuck and was good.
I recall in an interview, he was talking about his work with the Coen brothers, and I think it's important to remember that 3 years previous to this movie, he worked with the Coen brothers in Raising Arizona. This movie comes out the exact same year as Barton Fink, which melts my brain that these two movies would be released in the same year. He did mention in an interview that he thought that the Coen brothers would never work with him again. He had been drinking quite a bit and was very difficult to work with back in this time. So maybe he was just taking roles. He clearly had some other issues. I am dying to know what sort of Hollywood meetings took place that led to the casting of John Goodman in this movie. It would have been a much better fit and a much better movie if you had someone a little bit I would say, nastier, like Sam Kinison or Bobcat Goldthwait as the King Ralph role.
I have a couple other ones for you because I wrote that. I said, Kinison, instead of being dumb and slightly mentally challenged, he'd be an asshole about it. And it would be funny. Rodney Dangerfield could have even done it. He would have been endearing. Or you could have had any other the handful of like the fat actors, Farley, Candy, any of those would have been good.
Yeah, Chris Farley was just about to make his big break on Saturday Night Live. I think that he was actually released from like that whole class of Saturday Night Live was released, I think in like 93 or 94. And I remember like all those movies came out with those guys in them. So he was just there. Maybe John Goodman found that window where Rodney Dangerfield was a little too old. Chris Farley wasn't quite ripe yet. He got in there. He got this movie. But I think, Big D, you're married. Mm-hmm. I like to think that John Goodman's relationship with film is like a married man's relationship to sex, right? So when you're with your wife, you want it to be substantial and meaningful. You want to connect and look into each other's eyes and you want to make love and have it last for like, 20, 40, 60 minutes. But when you're just jerking off, that's King Ralph. You're like, you don't even want to look at your own dick. You're not even waiting for it to get hard. You just want everything to get out as fast as it can and move on to the next thing. That's how he approached this movie.
I like it. I think you're right. Because he must have read the script and he said, all right, in this scene, Ralph, he's in his dressing room, and which he shares with a chimpanzee named Mitzi. And you're going to have an argument about losing your spot on the stage. The chimpanzee actually, to which Ralph replies, you little backstabbing bitch. So this probably is the jerking off of John Candy Rolls.
But, we see King Ralph in his Vegas sheen outfit. And I was, again, having not seen this movie in a long time, I was like, fuck yeah, if he's just going to wear these ridiculous suits the whole time, that's going to be wonderful. But then you see him in his like street clothes when they go out for the first hot dog. And that is one hell of an ensemble.
No, but they pick him up. He's wearing something that I don't think anybody would wear. The Skid Row t-shirt. Yes, I'll admit it's awesome. But then he's got a Green Bay Packers like starter jacket, a long button down that's untucked and opened. Then there's a Cubs baseball cap, flat bill, that's about 3 sizes too small. Nobody would dress like this. I don't know that anyone who did this character and dressed him that way knew what Americans look like. Gene, you're Persian. It would be as if you told me we're doing a movie where Roger Roper finds out he is the next Shah of Iran and they're going to pull him in there. What would a typical Iranian dress like? I would have no clue. I would be like, okay, I don't know, a turban. Okay, we're going to give him maybe like what are those crescent swords called?
A scimitar.
Yep, we're going to give him a scimitar. Everybody will be smoking from hookahs. They'll be drinking tea. Boom, let's do it.
I bet you $1 those are John Goodman's regular clothes. I've seen pictures of him from that time period. It's not that much of a stretch.
There's a great Twitter account that actually just shows photos of people on the premiere of their movie. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it's just every day they just post photos from like the opening night of whatever, like The Mask or whatever. And it is shocking what these millionaire Hollywood celebrities are wearing to the openings. Like, I don't know who the fuck is dressing these people, but it's embarrassing.
I've seen that account, and it just shows us that the 90s were truly the ugliest time in American culture.
As evidenced by King Ralph. So Ralph is flown to London, where Cedric gives him a crash course on royal etiquette. The king goes to a strip club and meets Miranda Green, an out-of-luck exotic dancer, and dares her to go out on a date with him. Meanwhile, Lord Percival Graves, played by John Hurt, proposes to declare the reigning House of Wyndham at an end and replace it with the House of Stuart, of which he is patriarch. Prime Minister Joffrey Hale states that Ralph's succession is legitimate unless he commits a grievous error. Graves bribes a cash-strapped Miranda to stir up controversy by having a public relationship with Ralph. Despite warnings by Cedric not to commit a mistake similar to that of King Edward VIII, Ralph sneaks out of the palace to have a romantic date with Miranda at Hyde Park. The next day, Miranda returns the money to Graves, but he already has photographs of her with Ralph. In order to preserve Ralph's reputation, Miranda breaks up with him.
So I'm trying to figure out who should be more offended, the Americans or the British. Americans are fat, obnoxious, they're loud, but the British are completely oblivious, clueless. They don't seem the brightest. The whole royal family's dead. There's now a big, fat, obnoxious American who's the new king. He is somehow walking around London and nobody is noticing him. how many fat, obnoxious Americans are there? I mean, John Candy himself couldn't even walk around London without being spotted like this. How do they not see the new king?
Well, maybe they confused him with John Goodman.
Fuck, what did I say?
John Candy.
God damn it. I'm getting ready for Game of Thrones.
There you go.
So I understand kind of where the movie is coming from about the typical loud American stereotype. I lived in Sweden for a year. I'm originally from New York, and I was like, that's so wrong. That's not who Americans are. After some substantial time in Sweden, I remember one day I was out, and I could hear really loud people. I look over, and it was people dressed very much like this. Acid wash jeans, t-shirt tucked in, no belt. It was an overweight family. And I just looked at myself. I said, holy shit, the loud American tourist is real. Everything that people have been saying is true. And when you see it, like if your house is a little dirty, you don't notice it. But when somebody comes in and scrubs it clean, you go, holy shit, how did I miss that? So for people who haven't traveled outside the US, a lot of these stereotypes that might offend you are a little close to home.
Hold on. Look, I don't want to be fucking Captain America over here, but I've been to Europe as well. And Germans on like a Friday or a Saturday night when you're waiting for the train and they're projectile vomiting through fences and jumping on the train tracks, screaming at each other. The English before and after soccer matches rolling through the streets, fucking singing their asses off in the middle of the night, waking everybody up. Everybody's an asshole, not just Americans.
No, but I'm not talking about assholes, okay? Americans are the only ones. The Americans are the ones who go to London and only eat in Burger King.
You know those Olive Garden commercials where they're like, whenever my Uncle Tony comes from Italy, I take him to the Olive Garden because Uncle Tony's coming to America to have some fucking pasta, right? That shit, Iranians are like that. My aunt and uncle, when they come over to visit, we try to take them out for like sushi. They're like, what? This fish isn't cooked. We take them out for Chinese food. The rice is all stuck together. Can't they make rice? We take them out for a steak. This meat is undercooked. They want only Persian food. We take for granted the fact that as Americans, we actually live in a country that has influences from all over the place. Other places that are far more homogenous do not have that. Now, England, I think, is an exception because you have a lot of like Indian influence, a lot of Pakistani influence, a lot of Chinese influence. So there's quite a bit of a mix there. But I think one of the things this movie does really well is not making fun of the British. They can seem a bit foppish at times, but like, here's what I was worried about was Peter O'Toole comes in as Cedric and he's very, stiff upper lip, very proper Englishman. And I'm like, oh God, King Ralph's like folksy American charms are going to win him over. He's going to do some sort of toe tapping toward the end of the thing, hand clapping as Americans like to do. But Peter O'Toole, to his credit, he never wavers. And that makes parts of the movie actually quite bearable. John Hurt, God rest his soul, made a terrific villain. He was subtle about the performance, right? In the sense that he's like supposed to be the bad guy, but he's not like, yeah. Instead, he just has like a bizarre pronunciation of words. Like, did you notice the way he said house? He's like, his. and again, remember, John Hurt has a transatlantic accent, so he's putting on an accent for this, but those quirks kept me interested. The mustache was pure evil. I thought those two guys, Peter O'Toole and John Hurt, actually made parts of this movie worth watching.
But I ended up feeling bad for Peter O'Toole. He was like your grandfather who's getting onset dementia and starts forgetting things. This is a distinguished actor. Peter O'Toole has 9 Oscar nominations. He's T.E. Lawrence in Lawrence of Arabia, for God fucking sake. He did the inverse career move of John Goodman. He started out in one of the best movies ever and then got progressively worse. John Goodman's doing it reverse, but poor Peter O'Toole.
Maybe he bought a boat that year or made some bad real estate investments. We don't know.
So fun fact, in Peter O'Toole's obituary and his memorial, they listed his filmography. Conspicuously, King Ralph was not in that list.
Exactly. That's all you need to know.
They're like, he did Lawrence of Arabia, and also Lawrence of Arabia. Did he do anything else?
No.
Nope.
Nothing else.
One thing I did find odd was that Ralph clearly is an American because the first thing he does is goes to a strip club. Take my word for it. If you want good strippers, go to Florida, go to Arizona. It's affordable. They're approachable. You always know what you're going to pay up front. When I first visited the UK in 1999, a lot of my friends from Arizona State, the first thing they did, we're 19 years old. They're like, oh, we can drink and we can go see strippers. Let's do it. So everyone went out and started hitting the strip clubs in London. And I started getting these horror stories back. And so 2 of the things that they love to do is one of them is you get charged for the chat. So in the US, if you go sit down at a table and a dancer comes and starts talking to you, she's chatting you up, hey, are you having a good time? What's that shirt all about? Why are you wearing a tie? In my case, why are you wearing a belt? I didn't know that was a weird thing. But in the UK, they can actually charge you for the minutes spent talking to you. And what happens is they'll have a bouncer come over and collect that money if you refuse to pay it. So pointers, always ask the rules at the strip club. Always ask for the prices up front. Does this cost anything to talk to you? And never, ever, ever use a credit card at a strip club.
Well, never. And I remember Cole Pitcock mentioned this on Big Trouble in Little China. He said in China, they were renowned for doing this, that they would start talking to you. And the bouncers, they were like guys who would come in and take you out back. So one of the things as Americans we should never take for granted is the quality of our strip clubs, the integrity and the product that we get. It's fantastic. They take it seriously.
Despite Ralph's reluctance to accept British culture and his ineptness in formal affairs, he makes a positive impression on King Mulamboa of Zambezi during the latter's state visit. The two monarchs share their concerns about the role of leadership they have assumed and the economic interests of their nations. Ralph accumulates a small but loyal following.
So what I don't get, where obviously you can make fun of him for being a moron, he's a buffoon, but there's no fat jokes. There's not a single fat joke in this whole movie. Now they dress him up that makes him look fat and roly-poly, but in every, fat guy comedian's movies, Chris Farley, John Candy, Belushi, the main part of the movie is making fun of them for being fat. No, there was no fat guy in a little coat or Belushi in Animal House, fat, dumb, and stupid's no way to go through life. They don't once call him out for being obese. Was John Goodman against these? Was he too above fat jokes?
No, he was just too busy being painfully racist. He didn't have time for fat jokes. I'm like watching this scene where they bring in the African king and I'm like, oh no, Ralph is going to say something culturally insensitive. Or, oh no, Ralph is going to make some sort of a British faux pas. I expected some awkwardness when the dignified king of Zambezi parades into the room. Never in my wildest dreams did I expect John Goodman to be like, what's up, boy? What's happening? Give me 5. I was like, he's not like Ralph he's not that stupid and insensitive. This is ridiculous.
I believe his exact quote was, what's happening? Give me quintet, brother. And then when you think the movie can't get any more awkward or culturally insensitive, he actually challenges an African king to a spear chucking contest.
I would argue that that's not really what's taken place. There's that dramatic pause. He knows he's kind of really screwed up. And he says to the king, hey, do you want to grab a beer? Which is, just supposed to be the very American everyman sort of approach. And it cuts to a scene of them just having a beer and having a conversation.
Yeah, but there's a difference between having a beer with a guy and literally chucking spears with an African king.
Yes.
They even put like the little feathers on the spears. And then he asks, I think, hey, where can I get a set of those? You're going to have to give me some.
Well, he beats him at darts first. And I think the king says, you know what? We've played your game. Let's play my game. And clearly in Africa, they throw spears.
But dude, let's look at the setting. He didn't take him back to the castle in the beautiful lawn and throw at a target. He took him to a deserted alley with trash and they spray painted the bullseye on like a piece of cardboard and all the dignitaries are there chucking spears.
One of my favorite things is I was like, okay, I got to look and make sure that Zambezi isn't a real country. It's not. It is a river. And then I was like, is there a King Mulamboa? Well, on Twitter there is. So somebody in 2011 was like, hey, it would be a funny joke after watching King Ralph. I'm going to make a King Mulamboa Twitter account. And it's at Zambezi Kingdom. This person tweeted 4 times and then just quit, which is kind of how I felt about King Ralph.
Yeah. So this movie is following that traditional fish out of water, arc that we always see. It's the average Joe, average person trying to fake it. But in the other movies that we've done or other movies that are renowned for this, like Vivian, who's trying to be a socialite in Pretty Woman. You have Dolores, who's pretending to be a nun in Sister Act. Prince Akeem, another African prince, trying to be a regular American and coming to America. They're trying to at least pull it off. They give a shit. They make Ralph seem like he's mentally challenged. The equivalent of Ralph in this movie would be if Vivian in Pretty Woman got pissed off at the polo match and just started circling dudes up and blowing them to get her American enthusiasm back. That's how ridiculous this is.
Yeah, but that's something I want to watch.
Right, but at least Vivian didn't do that. Vivian wasn't caught banging the lawyer or blowing a dude on his horse.
That all sounds better than John Goodman in a bathtub eating milk duds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did have to wonder why Coming to America was such a iconic and memorable and amazing film. This is kind of the formulaic opposite, and it just has none of that charm. It's nowhere near the same level. It's clear to me that this movie is just lowbrow heaven. If it gets credit for one thing, they write from a very singular point of view, this everyman perspective. The comedy is incredibly basic, like an old Flintstones or a sitcom show from the 50s. It's painfully predictable. The scene where he's in the bubble bath and his page says, "I can bring you anything you like, the finest chocolates." And the guy goes, how about some milk duds? And then it cuts to all these giant gold chalices that are filled with paydays and Snickers bars and just any gas station candy bar you can imagine. It's hilarious that this guy has anything available to him and he just wants the most basic trash.
Yeah, but how many times have you been at a fancy dinner or at a wedding or something like that, and you get the food, and I'm that guy. I'm like, I would rather have a fucking Big Mac or a burrito supreme. There's a lot of times where that good American fast food shit garbage is better than the finest of chocolates.
But the only thing you said is predictable that I think it was missing was maybe some of the nutty professor farting. I was expecting him when he's in the bathtub and he's got all the chocolate to be like, and he goes, "Sorry." So bad.
Is chocolate a farting food?
He had a fucking buffet next there. There were probably chicken fingers and mozzarella sticks.
That does sound pretty good, actually.
So Ralph's staff arranged for him to marry Princess Anna of Finland to continue the royal bloodline and guarantee jobs for the UK and Finland's newly discovered oil reserves in the Baltic Sea. On the night of the Finnish royal family's visit, Ralph is turned off by Princess Anna's unusually deep voice, her bizarre sexual preferences, and her nonchalant acceptance of arranged royal marriage. Miranda attends the royal ball as a setup by Graves, and photos of her affair with Ralph are given to Anna's father, King Gustav, which, along with Ralph's wild musical number, results in Finland turning down the UK in favor of Japan for the offshore equipment contract.
So I made fun of Home Alone and Kevin McAllister's his little traps and people stumbling around, and that is artistry. That is beautiful filmmaking compared to this wine glass domino scene. Did they expect in the writer's room? And they said, listen, here's what's going to happen. The king, obviously, the birds, they don't feed them too well in this country. He's going to shoot the bird, hit a wine glass. It creates a domino effect that goes maybe 100 glasses down. In what world does this work? And in what writer's room would this be funny? Do you think anyone in the theater laughed?
Do you think this was written in a writer's room?
I mean, like his room, like his parents' room or the basement. What are you doing up there? I'm writing my movie, Mom. Shut up.
This is some guy on his lunch break at the construction site sitting with all his other buddies. They're all eating their sandwiches. And he goes, and then that chicken just shoots up and knocks all the wine glasses over. Every one of them falls. They all get wine. It's going to be hilarious.
I'm just thinking, people ask, if you had a time machine, what would you go do? Would you go win the lottery? Would you go stop Lincoln's assassination? I would go back to 1991 and sit in a theater and see how many people laughed at the wine glass. They could be like, fuck, I'm impressed, King Ralph. I'm impressed.
You caught me there. I wasn't expecting that one.
I mean, this is a time when we thought Gulf War I was a good idea. So, But it's not just the physical gags that fail. The wordplay, I think they were trying to be clever here. So there's this whole long-running fox hunting gag when King Ralph is talking to Gustav. And that's not how wordplay works. So King Ralph is talking about fox hunting, and he's talking about chasing chicks. But King Gustav is literally talking about fox hunting. And it's one thing for people not to understand the slang meaning of a literal term, but they're asking us to believe that King Ralph doesn't understand the literal meaning of fox hunting, like it actually is a thing. This movie lacks imagination. That's its biggest problem. All the jokes are so obvious where they had the opportunity with this setup to do outlandish and bizarre things, which you would see later with Adam Sandler movies and Chris Farley movies.
So it works when they're both having a conversation about different things, but the vernacular and terminology is the same. I go to the club. It could be a fox hunting club. That makes sense. What would the king who speaks English think he means when you don't know where they've been? I don't want to catch something. I don't sleep with them anymore. What does the king think? He's fucking the foxes? It doesn't work. But I couldn't get over it. A lot of times people take a role and you'll always see them as that character. Julian Glover plays King Gustav. And right when he comes on screen, I'm like, holy shit, that's the fucking Nazi. That's Donovan, the Nazi sympathizer from Indiana Jones. I couldn't even once take him as the Finnish king. I just kept thinking what he did to poor Indiana.
So basically, it's another example of a person's career being ruined by King Ralph.
Yeah. Yeah.
To this portion of the film's credit, my first audible giggle came from the princess's voice. She starts talking, and it's just goofy, and I can't help but laugh. I just thought, God, can you imagine being married to that? Or if they'd ever have to actually consummate, just that, oh my God.
Oh, I'm going to come. Oh.
And then at the end, when, his buddy asks him, so how's it going? He goes, oh, great. We have nothing in common. She's got a voice like a tuba, but Aletha's party stinks. That was just, it was delivered well. The timing was right. This small portion of the movie works for me.
But this answered a question for me. Have either of you seen the documentary on HBO about Theranos?
I mean, I have a Twitter, so I feel like I've seen it.
Okay.
I was busy writing 8 pages of notes for Game of Thrones.
The big takeaway is Elizabeth Holmes, who was the head, and she's going to go to jail for a while now. She adopted Princess Anne's vocal tones. She'd be like, I believe we're going to change the future. Technology in a vial. She did this exact thing, and people, it caught them off guard. They didn't know what to do with it. So I think there's a good chance she learned that from this movie and Princess Anne. Watch it. It's real.
All right. So, we talked about the wine glass dominoes and the fox hunting gag, and there's all sorts of different avenues of comedy being tried here. John Goodman, I started thinking about what it is that I like about his acting in comedies. And he's a big man, but he doesn't really do the typical big man slapstick stuff. Like, he's not a clown. He had some physical scenes like in The Big Lebowski, but that's more like comical rage than goofiness. He's much more visceral, much more aggressive than most people who are the fat guy in a comedy. In this movie, they give him that harpsichord scene where he decides to do the musical number. And they give him a little room to move around, and I got excited about it. He first jumps up from the harpsichord, his big fat butt out there, and he's playing, kind of on his tippy toes. And I got a little bit of a chuckle, but it soon wore thin for me. I couldn't help but think, like, man, if this was like Belushi or Farley, this scene could be a whole lot better.
But again, this is stretching my suspension of disbelief. Forget about an American being the King of England. The band does not have a piano, but they conveniently have a set of multicolored maracas and a tambourine. This is BS. And at the end of that scene, he doesn't do physical humor. He is a sweaty, repulsive mess.
I think what it is, the British only have instruments from countries that they've invaded and colonized. So the maracas were there and the tambourine was there, but clearly they did not colonize Italy.
I've never been in a band, but I own maracas and a tambourine. I think everyone around here just does. I bet you $10 I own maracas.
Why?
Somewhere in that house. Somewhere in that house, there are maracas and a tambourine.
Came across one. I go, maybe I'll need this.
I'm picturing your house like dusk till dawn. People come by near your home. You end up killing them, taking their stuff, and just collecting it. Like, are there large boxes of people's belongings?
No, it's a little bit more organized. It's kind of like the old Chinaman shop in the beginning of Gremlins.
It's exactly like that.
It's just sort of, you walk in and it's almost kind of merchandised in a way. And there's just these cases that feature oddities and strange things. And inventory is always just kind of rotating. It's like a Fuddruckers or a TGI Fridays. Bunch of fun stuff on the wall. Some fun family atmosphere.
Exactly.
Realizing that the role of king comes with certain expectations and that he cannot rely on his charm or blue-collar background, Ralph accepts a stern rebuke from Cedric and endeavors to set things right. Miranda confesses to Ralph her role in the scandal, and he walks out on her. Ralph develops suspicions about his circumstances and learns through Phipps that Cedric is another heir to the throne and had refused the role.
So people still don't recognize him. He's now been the king a while. He's in all the tabloids, he's in the press, but he's still walking around with Miranda hand in hand. People don't recognize him. What the fuck? Come on.
I mean, they start to a little bit, but what I don't get is this whole buildup with Miranda's secret. Like, she keeps saying, like, there are things about me you don't know. And I'm like, what is it? Like, is she an assassin? Is she actually his daughter? Is she dying of AIDS? Like, what is it about Miranda that we don't know? I totally forgot that Lord Graves paid her off at the beginning and she gave him the money back. I'm like, big fucking deal. Yeah. Why didn't we just say that from the get-go? This isn't like a movie where, like, you know, they banged and then all of a sudden, like, she's like, oh, by the way, I have this horrible disease. No. A guy tried to pay you off. You refuse the money. If anything, it'd be like, hey, warning, King Ralph, this fucker's out to get you.
Yeah, if anything, King Ralph would be pissed at Miranda for not giving him a heads up. Forget about it. She shot ketchup at the photographer. Should have given him at least a warning.
I also like that he takes nothing seriously in this movie until it's time to yell at a woman. Then suddenly he's all piss and vinegar.
You could have threw us for a loop and just have him slap her out in the courtyard.
Wow.
What the fuck, Ralph?
Yes.
Ralph addresses Parliament, apologizing for his recent actions and informing the country that he has worked out a deal with King Mulamboa of Zambezi to purchase 200 million pounds worth of British mining equipment. That's pounds sterling, not weight. And to open 3 car engine plants in Britain, ensuring jobs for Miranda's family and thousands of Britons. He then reveals that Graves has been sabotaging his succession to the throne and has arrested him for violating the Treason Act of 1702. Finally, he announces that he will abdicate and reveals Cedric as his successor. After Cedric accepts his duty as king, Ralph is appointed as the 3rd Duke of Warren, with a lucrative annual salary and his own recording studio in his country estate. He marries Miranda and raises a family with her while fronting his own singing group.
So as an American, I'm very proud of our democracy, of our government structure. Usually it works very well, the sets of checks and balances. But British Parliament, I like a lot of what they do. You're able to just openly talk shit and mock each other. You can laugh, you can point. It's funny, but the British can't air that on TV. You can't show them and use it as comedy. I think we could adopt some of the world's, the way that they do things. Have you ever seen in the Philippines when they go crazy and the people start throwing chairs or people start punching each other? That kind of passion is what I think is missing from American politics.
Yeah, I think we're a step away from that. And one of my favorites is when you're watching different parliaments around the world and they throw shoes.
Yeah.
The shoe throwing is great because it's just this wave. It's just this avalanche of shoes pouring down on you. One of the things I learned when I was in the UK is I actually went to the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And in their parliament, they have these 2 red lines that go down the length of the floor. So you have one red line on the left side and one red line on the right side on the center of the floor. And so I asked the tour guide, Adobe, I said, hey, what are those lines for? And they said, oh, what they did was these lines are 2 sword lengths away from each other. Because back in the day, they would pull swords on each other, but they're so British that they wouldn't cross the red line. So you draw your blade and then be like, well, fuck, I can't reach him.
If it was not for this line, I would slay you.
Exactly.
This damn line. What am I going to do?
So they just settle for touching tips?
Exactly. Ting ting and call it a day. Ting, ting.
Yeah, but I'm glad. I was afraid. I didn't even look at the time. I said, if we need a redemption arc where all of a sudden Ralph decides I'm going to do what's best for England, I'm going to become a good king. I was like, I can't take that. Please don't end this movie where he's a capable leader. I was just happy he gave up and continued his long life of quitting and just walked away. I was so thankful.
This movie really turns on a dime. This is not the part of the film where you want to get up and grab something to drink because you're going to come back and everything's going to be different than it was 2 minutes before. It's a hell of a drop off. I feel like whoever was writing this, everyone just kind of went home after the scene with the princess and left the caterer to finish it or something. It's, the guy I had beers with. Yeah, he's going to save us. I quit. Hire this guy instead. The end.
I thought it couldn't get worse than the scene where King Ralph is getting, knighted and he puts his hands over his ears like, I'm not going to get cut like I cut a guy. Funny callback. And I'm like, nope, it does get worse during the end credits. What the hell was that? The movie ends. Now, the way that this was written up in Wikipedia was that Ralph is appointed as the third Duke of Warren with a lucrative annual salary and his own recording studio in his own country estate. He marries Miranda and raises a family with her while fronting his own singing group. That is not what I saw on screen. What I saw on screen was the third Duke of Warren, Ralph Jones, dressed in like old-timey royal garb, singing the Duke of Earl, which she isn't, while backed up by the Dukettes, who just came out of nowhere. And then the camera pans over, and you've got Baron Ralph II, the little baby, and a little tiny Packers windbreaker. And then Miranda's there with like Princess Diana mom hair, and her eyes have gone dead. You can see the regret. She sees the folly. He's in a nightmare home, and they all have to live with it.
Yeah, but I've just figured out why. They do that full song at full blast over the credits. They didn't want people talking leaving the movie. Like if you were like, Gene, what the fuck did we watch? And then people behind you heard, they'd be like, yeah, that movie's a piece of shit. By blaring Duke of Earl, people just wanted to get out. They ran out of the theater, and the negative word about the movie didn't spread. It's genius.
If you don't want to watch this movie but are curious about this Duke of Earl scene, please go to YouTube and check it out. It's amazingly bad. Like, it sums up the entire movie in about 30 seconds.
It's like Fat Amadeus with electric instruments.
All right, now is the time where we rate King Ralph on the Shat meter. If you're not familiar with the Shat score, it goes from 0 to 5. 0 being a perfect movie. It is a bubble bath with the finest assortment of chocolates, milk duds, and any other candy you can imagine. You're wearing your crown and just enjoying yourself as King Ralph. And 5 Wipes is an absolute disaster. It is the pairing of a Green Bay Packers windbreaker with some sort of a bright colored button up and a Skid Row t-shirt with a Chicago Cubs hat and a desperate need of a haircut. We'll start with you, Big D. What is your score for King Ralph?
This one's easy. The movie is eminently forgettable. It's simply a string of bull in a china shop gags. Ralph hitting a home run with a cricket bat and running the bases. He's sitting in the royal bath, scarfing down milk duds, to the ending when he does his rousing rendition of Duke of Earl or even the Good Golly Miss Molly. It is terrible, but it did make me really look at some of his other roles in a different light. I think Fred Flintstone, that role is Oscar worthy compared to this movie. It was the least fun that I've had, but I think it's given me a better perspective. Things that I've trashed in the past, I will be a little more lenient with. I now have a perspective of what untalented, unfunny, and undedicated people will create. And I will always say that's King Ralph. I'd rather watch Mouth of Madness. I'd rather watch Willow. I'd rather watch anything than this. This is a 5.
Adam, if you're listening right now and you're heartbroken over Big D's wipe score, just know this, that often as we've been doing this thing for over 100 episodes over the years, we need a refresher on what a 5 wiper is. And so you have given us the benchmark, the litmus test. You have given us the low water mark where we now know this is Big D's 5 wiper. I've never given a 5, but I might get there someday. But this is what his 5 wiper is. So now he knows every other score he gives is going to be based on King Ralph. That is a position of honor for you, Adam.
You have officially calibrated the Shat scale and my perspective on every film going forward. So I thank you for that.
Wow.
All right. So 5 wipes from Big D. King B, what's your score for King Ralph?
I really put some time into thinking about this. I did The Burbs with Big D and Carrie Gross, and they hated it. I enjoyed it way more than they did. This kind of made me wish I was rewatching The Burbs again. It's of a similar time period. I feel that they were aiming for a similar audience. Goodman is just too friendly and soft for this role. They needed someone a little bit more ugly, like Bobcat Goldthwait. He did Shakes the Clown and Hot to Trot, which I think are similar sort of, or should have been similar sort of movies of the time. Something more crass would have made the fish out of water scenario more entertaining. But this movie is written for a specific type of audience, and that core group of people is going to love this incredibly bland, uninteresting, not really thought-provoking movie. I can't hate it as much as I want to because I understand that there is a place for it. I kind of wanted to give it a 3.5, but ultimately it's just got to be a 4. It was a prototype for many more great things that were going to come later.
I just want to set the record straight here. I gave The Burbs a 3.5.
Okay.
Carrie gave it a 4.25. You gave it a 2.5. You're telling me that this movie is only 1.5 worse?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I know you can't change it now, but come on. Use this movie.
Yeah, it's only 1.5 worse. That's it. It's not a 5. It's not even a 4.5. There's a few things that are kind of funny and good in there. You know, it's because we got a King Ralph. That's how we got Adam Sandler movies. I believe that. You know, this was sort of like a testing for that lowbrow doofus humor.
And that's a good thing?
Well, you got to start somewhere.
I like Adam Sandler movies.
Yeah, Adam Sandler movies are great. But I don't think you would have an Adam Sandler movie in the same realm of quality that if King Ralph hadn't come around to sort of go, well, this works and this doesn't.
So that's 4 wipes, King B. Is that your final score?
4 wipes. Historical context.
All right. So King B with 4 wipes. Big D with 5 wipes. I want to say that this movie wasn't offensive, but it was. And I want to say that it wasn't torture to watch, but it actually did feel like it would never end. At one point I looked and I was like, okay, ready to go to the bathroom now, going to go to bed. And I was like, oh God, there's a half hour left. And it's only a 90-minute movie.
Yes.
But it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. This isn't like Willow bad. I really liked Peter O'Toole and John Hurt. I thought that the two of them made for a good combined, like a good 30 minutes of movie that I actually enjoyed watching. Anything featuring British B-roll is delightful to watch. I was like, oh, look, it's Big Ben. Oh, it's Parliament. Oh, it's Windsor. It's Buckingham Palace. So for me, as a massive Anglophile, there were parts of the movie that I enjoyed. A few too many spotted dick jokes, but what are you going to do? It's the 90s. It just wasn't enjoyable. So I wasn't horrified by what I saw. I definitely don't want to ever see it again. So for me, I'm going to go with King B's score and also say it's a 4 wiper. So adding that up with 4 wipes from me, 4 wipes from the King B, and 5 wipes from Big D, that comes out to an average of 4.3 repeating wipes for King Ralph.
So in the pantheon of Shat, again, the system seems to work. It is tied at 102 with Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Okay. It is slightly better than Predator 2, 10 Things I Hate About You, and Safe Men. It's a little bit worse than Backdraft, Time Cop, Independence Day, and even Westworld. It's down at the bottom, but for me, this is the worst.
I think the reason why this gets a little bit of a pass is it's a comedy. I think really that's what kind of saves it, in the sense that Predator 2 was funny. It just wasn't trying to be funny, you know?
True.
And so that's sort of the difference, is that there's a lower bar, I believe, for making a comedy passable than for making a drama or an action movie passable, right? So I think it's a fair score. I would much rather watch Predator 2 100 times before watching King Ralph again.
Oh, I'd watch anything. Anything. I'd watch Speed 2 Cruise Control again. At least I get the motorcycle scene chasing the empty, the ice cream van truck. I'd get that. That's better.
So moving on to a movie we do want to watch. Big D, what do we have coming up next on Shat the Movies?
The cavalcade of commissions continues. And this one will be about a fairy tale adventure about a beautiful young girl and her one-time true love. He must find her after a long separation to save her. They must battle the evils of the mystical kingdom of Florin to be reunited with each other. Based on the William Goldman novel of the same name, The Princess Bride, which earned its loyal audience and is loved by Cary Gross. It was commissioned by Adam R. It was released in September 25th, 1987, and directed by Rob Reiner. So stay to the trailers if you want to hear a little bit of what's coming, but it'll be the epic, iconic, and seem to be universally loved Princess Bride.
That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat the Movies. You can find us on Facebook by visiting shatthemovies.com/Facebook. The website is shatthemovies.com, and our email address is hosts@shatthemovies.com, where you can write in your feedback and suggestions for movies you'd like to see and categories you would want to watch. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can contribute through PayPal, Venmo, and Amazon at shatthemovies.com/PayPal/Venmo or /Amazon. And if you'd like to help us find sponsors, please go to shatthemovies.com/survey, fill out a few questions, and it'll help us find sponsors that match your interests. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. Also, you can check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, True Detective, and we currently are doing American Gods and Game of Thrones. You can find out all the information on our website, shatontv.com. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert, the King Bee, and Carrie Gross, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next week for the following classic.
I brought you a special present.
What is it? A book?
This is a special book. It was the book my father used to read to me when I was sick, and I used to read it to your father. And today, I'm going to read it to you.
I'll try and stay awake.
Wesley had no money for marriage, so he packed his few belongings and left the farm to seek his fortune across the sea. The law of the land gave Humperdinck the right to choose his bride.
The fabric will make the prince suspect the Gildarians have abducted his love.
You never say anything about killing anyone.
I just happened to look behind us and something is there.
He's obviously seen us with the princess and must therefore die. Pick up one of those rocks, get behind the boulder. The minute his head is in view, hit it with the rock!
I was not a sportsman, lad.
I've got my country's 500th anniversary to plan, my wedding to arrange, my wife to murder. I'm swamped.
Jesus, Grandpa, what did you read me this thing for?
Well, who says life is fair? Where is that written? Fencing, fighting, chases, escapes, giants, monsters, torture, revenge, true love, miracles,